Hello and welcome to another update. In this one I'll be covering the latest updates regarding the war in Ukraine. Starting out, we'll be looking at the Bakhmut area, where here we see that after the Ukrainian forces managed to capture this part here north of Klishchiivka, fighting continues throughout the front line as the Ukrainians continuously try to push both on the northern and southern flanks of the Bakhmut, trying to push into Klishchiivka, to the north of it and to the south of it, also to the north by Khomove, as well as by the Berhivka-Yahidne area here to the north. So generally there's a lot of fighting here, and the general situation is that it is mostly a stalemate. There's not a lot of movement, but sometimes there is a little bit, like we saw yesterday with a small capture north of Klishchiivka. Generally the Ukrainians have been stuck here for about 2 months, and then I kept thinking the Russians keep sending reinforcements to Klishchiivka, but it doesn't seem like they're able to actually push the Ukrainians back, which means that if the Ukrainians continue like this, they should eventually be able to capture the village of Klishchiivka. And the Russians, of course, are not willing to take such a risk that they lose Klishchiivka and then lose the whole southern front. Then comes in this satellite image that recently was shared from Western sources, which compares areas here to the south of Bakhmut by Kodema between the 2nd of July and the 1st of August. And in this, we see here that there's been a significant increase of fortifications. We see here to the south of Kodema, I've mapped it out here. You can also see it on the satellite imagery, especially if you go to my Telegram channel, you'll be able to see it there. You see, these are all of the outline trenches that are built here to the south of Kodema. There is 3 trenches lines of defense here in the west and to the east of the central part. I made it into 3 parts. The central part, which includes the ones here in the center, then there's the western part, and then there's the eastern part. So essentially we're seeing 3 lines of defense here to the east, 3 lines of defense here to the west, and then some central defenses here to ascertain that if Ukrainians break through one side, then they'll be able to still have some defenses to protect the eastern part, for example, in case the Ukrainians were to break through. So what we're seeing is that the Russians are heavily fortifying here to the south of Bakhmut, but this is still far from the front line. Unfortunately, there's no satellite imagery from the rest of the front, especially here by this road between Bakhmut and the south. However, considering the significant increase in fortifications by Kodema, it is likely, I'll not say for sure, but it is likely that the Russians are also building fortifications around the rest of the area, whether it be by Obitne or to the east of it. Either way, it seems that the Russians are aware that if the Ukrainians manage to cut off this road, there will be no supplies to Bakhmut. Therefore, they are trying to build fortifications so that in case Klishchiivka falls, they'll be able to actually hold on. So the Ukrainians have essentially lost this battle by taking this long because the Russians are just able to continue building fortifications. Their main complaint about Zaporizhia front is that the Russians have this many fortifications. It's very difficult to push through. They are gathering all of these forces, but in the end they are unable to break through the very first formal line of defense. They have just barely reached it, and then here in the Bakhmut section, the Russians are just building another set of defenses, which in the end, will the Ukrainians be able to break through this one? What's the difference between this and Zaporizhia? Until they actually break through in Zaporizhia, then I do not believe they'll be able to break through here. At the same time, as I mentioned, the Russians are not willing to take any risks. So even in the southern parts by the northwest of Berdyansk, here by Berhivka, they are also increasing the fortifications here. So they are making another line and they're just improving it, fortifying it further, making sure that even if the Ukrainians are able to break through the first 5 lines, they will still have another one. So the Russians are going yet another step beyond to prevent any possibility of Ukraine cutting this land bridge, because they are just sending fortifications further and further, building it up to the point that even if the Ukrainians are able to break through the first line, and the second line, and the third line, and the fourth line, and the fifth line, there's a sixth line. It is to a point where the Ukrainians would just have to go through this whole distance constantly fighting through fortifications. Now, why do I still consider it a possibility for the Ukrainians to turn things around and actually break through the first line of defense, or maybe even further? That is mainly because the West has still not yet reached the amount of equipment that they promised to send to Ukraine yet. They are continuously sending more weapons, and according to the latest reports, the 31 Abrams tanks reported to be pledged by the United States back in January will most likely be sent this month, as everything is ready and the training has finished and all of these things. So generally, the Ukrainian forces are able to receive these 31 Abrams tanks. There's also the 12 Challenger tanks, and then on top of that, they still have some Leopard tanks left. So they still have enough forces to actually launch a offensive. The main issue is that they haven't been able to shape the battlefield in a way that they're able to break through. Because every day that passes, now the Russians are fighting back. They're trying to push them back. The Ukrainians are still unable to gain full control over Robotyne. They have not entered the village. They have not completely taken over all the fortifications to the east of it. They have reached the first line of defense, then when they were pushed back from it. There is fighting here by Staromayorsk. They captured Staromayorsk. They're fighting for Roshayne. They've still not reached Staromilenivka. So generally across the front line, they're not in a position where they can just attack the first line of defense yet. The Russians have not retreated to the first line of defense. They are still in their forward positions, and as such, a main push is still very difficult to perform. They still need to make these advances. So there's a huge question as to how they will perform their main push. Interesting though is the continuous launching of Storm Shadow missiles across the front. So here there are two areas by the Russian logistical supply lines. Both are bridges from Crimea to Kherson, and we see here that they use the Storm Shadow missiles on the bridge here by the city of Enijesk, here to the southeast of Kherson, this bridge here, and we can see from the pictures it is basically destroyed. It is definitely unusable, and the Russian forces cannot use this area to supply their forces through this bridge anymore until it is repaired. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces also struck this bridge right here, the bridge by Jonah. And we can see here that the explosion here is less than that of the others. The bridge is still standing, and if we take a look at these other pictures, we can see that there's definitely enough space for trucks to move through, despite the hole in the center. However, this could be difficult for heavy equipment like tanks to cross over, because I know the bridges here, the Soviet bridges, are enough to carry the weight of Soviet tanks somewhere around the 55-60 ton mark. So it is less than Western tanks, more than Soviet tanks, but with a damage to the fundamentals of the bridge, it could be difficult for them to completely carry over. It would definitely strain it. However, trucks carrying equipment and ammunition and so on will definitely be able to pass through as long as there's enough space for them to do so. I'm not really sure how wide this is, but if there's enough space, then they'll be able to do it. If not, they will be able to fix this fairly quick, as they just need to do it similarly to the Antonovsky Bridge, where we've seen that they would fix it within a week. So within a week, it should be fully operable for the Russian forces. However, there's also the possibility of them, the Ukrainians, striking with further Storm Shadow missiles in the area. This is why we're seeing the Russians constantly bombard airfields in western Ukraine to try to planes and jets before that they're able to launch these Storm Shadow missiles into the bridges here. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and have a great day.